YouTube, what is good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. Every single week I drop a new video about film photography, so if that's your thing, definitely go ahead and subscribe. Alright, this week we're talking about Kodak Ultramax 400. This film stock is one of my favorite film stocks to use for a variety of reasons. It definitely isn't perfect and it's definitely not a top-end film stock, but there's a lot of really good things that this film has to offer, so we're going to talk about a few of those today. In this review, you're definitely going to hear a few comparisons to Portra. A lot of people say this is the poor man's Portra. I definitely haven't done an experiment to pin the two against each other, but you can't help but put these two in the same kind of league when you're comparing because of the fact that they're both Kodak and they're also both 400 speed. Jumping right into it, the first thing we need to talk about is the price. Considering where film prices have been going recently, this film sits in a really good spot, especially since it's an ISO 400 film. You get a lot of bang for your buck with this film, you know? You can do a lot of things, whether it's in daytime or maybe some low light situations, and the price doesn't get inflated just because it's a higher ISO film. In the US, this film retails for about $5 to $6, depending on whether you get the 24 exposure version or if you get the 36 exposure version. In the UK, the price is fairly similar except that it's pounds as opposed to dollars. So it's a bit more expensive in the UK, but pretty much everything photography related is. If you want to stock up on film, or if you're going on a trip, or you need just kind of like a nice bulk amount of film that isn't going to kill you when it comes to the price, this is definitely a good one to go with. Of course, there are other film stocks out there that you can compete against this one, but if you're considering stocking up on Ultramax, I would tell you that it's not a bad idea. It's just this perfect middle ground when it comes to usability and cost. As should become apparent throughout this video, this film is versatile. I wouldn't say this film is made for portraits or for landscapes or for street photography. It doesn't really lean into any one of those directions, but if this is all you have and you're trying to achieve some of those different things I just mentioned, you're not going to go wrong with this option. Of course, it does help to know the specific things that this film does really well and the things that it doesn't do as well. That way, even if you're stuck in one of these situations that's not ideal for this film, you can still make it work for you. So in terms of specs, the first thing we want to talk about is dynamic range. I don't have any of the technical numbers or anything like that. You can probably look that up yourself online, but what I do want to say is that this film tends to capture tones really well throughout an evenly lit scene. If you're in harsh sunlight, that's definitely where this film kind of buckles a bit. Given that it's a 400 speed film, in super bright sunlight, it does limit how wide you can have your aperture. Additionally though, if you have a scene that's fairly well lit, but then you have this really harsh light kind of sticking in there from one side or the other, it's definitely going to appear very blown out. This doesn't really hold on to those super highlights as well as you might want it to. One thing to mention about the highlights on this is that this film is cheaper, therefore you can't expect it to really deal with the highlights the way that a Portra would handle it, for example. So if you really need to control the highlights in your situation, especially if you're gonna have some really bright highlights opposed to some really dark shadows, then I probably wouldn't recommend this for you. Maybe that's asking too much of this film, but in some situations it might make or break the shot. I'd say you're probably better off metering for the highlights and then bringing up the shadows a bit in post. I'm really curious how these highlights would handle in printing, since you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to dodging and burning on an enlarger. I'll definitely be talking about that a bit more later. In terms of sharpness, I definitely consider this film fairly sharp. It of course isn't designed to be the most sharp film out there. You're not going to get this really super fine grain where you can see every detail in a very crisp way. There's definitely noticeable grain on this film, and that's understandably so given that it's a cheaper film and it's also ISO 400. That look that you get from this film stock is definitely part of the reason why you use it. So it doesn't bother me, but it might bother some of you. One of the key things you got to talk about when you talk about Ultramax is the saturation. This film has very bold color often. Whenever I edit my images, whether it's a digital image or even a film image, I do like to bump up the saturation just a bit because I really love color, especially in the appropriate scenes. This film gives you that right out of the box. I find myself not really having to edit this film at all because there is some strong saturation, but then also you do get a bit of extra contrast in there as well. This film is not kind of a plain canvas the way you consider Portra a bit of a plain canvas for you to then manipulate. This film definitely delivers a look right out of the box. If you know you're going to be shooting some scenes that feature a lot of color, especially reds and greens, definitely give this film stock a consideration. I think it'll help you achieve the best look possible and really showcase those existing colors really, really well. Okay, so we've looked at a lot of the different characteristics that this film provides. I think now we can talk about kind of what this is ideal for and what it's not ideal for. Overall, I think this all comes down to control. So for example, if you're going out on vacation and you're kind of just gonna walk around a city and take photos, and just kind of meander and not really care too much about the technicalities of your images, I think Ultramax is a great option for you. Again, you're not really caring to then control your images very much and then perhaps go through a very lengthy edit process after you've culled all your images from whatever trip you went on. If you don't plan on doing anything aggressive of that nature, then this film definitely is for you because it's gonna give you a look right out of the box and it's gonna eliminate a lot of kind of the choices that you might have with some other film stocks after the fact. Now, if you're working on a portrait session, for example, or some professional work, or maybe just a passion project, and you really want to keep a consistent look across a lot of different images, and you also want control so that you can do a lot of work in post, then I probably wouldn't recommend this film stock for you. Something a bit more pricey and professional level, such as Portra and some of the other options out there, that's probably better for you for those kind of use cases. Those other film stocks cost a lot more money because they perform better overall. They can handle a lot of the variables that a scene might throw at your way, but also they give you control. And when you scan those film stocks into your computer, you definitely have a bit more of a blank canvas that you can then manipulate in whatever way you want. So I mentioned printing earlier. I haven't printed anything with Ultramax yet, given that I've been going through my catalog kind of in a random fashion and just picking shots that I think are cool. Definitely printed a few different film stocks, but this one hasn't happened yet. In a future episode, I definitely will be printing some Ultramax so that you can see what it looks like, and I'll make sure to put the link above here as well. What are your thoughts on Ultramax based on my review? How about on your personal experiences? Do you like the film stock? Would you recommend it to people? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Okay, so I hope that review was pretty helpful for you. If you're on the fence about buying this film, I think this will give you some good information to make a decision. If you like this video or if it was helpful to you, definitely go ahead and leave me a like. I would really appreciate that. And of course, if you want to see other videos about other things I'm up to in film photography, or if you want to see some of the prints that I've been coming up with recently, definitely go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Until the next video, y'all. Peace.